You're listening to the IELTS Podcast. Learn from tutors and ex-examiners who are masters of IELTS preparation. Your host, Ben Worthington.
Hello there, IELTS students. In this tutorial, we are going to look at 23 IELTS academic writing task tips. Grab a pen, because this way we're going to make it into a more active learning project, so to speak. And you're more likely to remember and use this advice if you're writing it down. Also, I would just suggest that you save about 3 of these, or you implement 3 of these, master them or utilize them in your next academic task 1 graph description. And then once you've integrated it, then try and use another 3, and so on and so forth. It's just easier than trying to incorporate all of them at the same time, because we can quickly feel overwhelmed, and then it can, depending on your mental state, but it can easily trickle over into kind of like I wouldn't say mild depression, but you can feel overwhelmed. You can feel this is a bit too challenging, and it can be quite hard. It affects your motivation. So this is why I'm saying just try and remember at least 3, or try and utilize 3 in the next description that you write, and then come back to this list, or come back to your notes that you've made. Now then, before we jump into this, let me just tell you who I am. My name's Ben Worthington. I am from England, near Manchester. It's actually a different region. Manchester belongs to Lancashire, and I'm actually from Yorkshire. And if you know about the history of England, you may know that Lancashire and Yorkshire had a famous fight a long time ago, the War of the Roses. And so it could be interpreted as a little bit controversial as saying I'm from near Manchester, when really I should be saying from Yorkshire. Anyway, I say from Manchester because it's just easier to locate in one's mind. Manchester has much more global fame and prestige than Yorkshire. Definitely more prestige than my hometown of Huddersfield. Anyway, I'm from England, and I moved away about 18 years ago, more or less, almost 20 years ago. Started to teach English. Then I quickly specialised in IELTS. And to get better, to become the best at teaching IELTS, I interviewed the best at the time. I interviewed lots of people, not just IELTS experts, not just examiners, but also pronunciation experts, speech therapists, listening experts, grammar experts, all the experts I could find, recorded those interviews, released them as the podcast, and then I integrated what worked. After testing it on my students, I integrated it into our online course of Jump to Band 7, or it's free. And you can find that at IELTSPodcast.com. And this is how I came to specialize in IELTS. And a lot of these tips come from my own experience, from experts, and most of all, though, from just testing them out and seeing what worked and what didn't work, and also writing out a few hundred graph descriptions, which eventually went onto the online resources we've got, into the online sample essays. So without further ado, let's jump into this. First of all, let's just review. IELTS Academic Task 1, you can have a flow chart, a bar chart, a pie chart, a line chart. There's lots of different graphics. You could even have a map to describe. And most of these tips will be useful for any of those challenges, any of those graphics, any of those rubrics, as they're sometimes called, that you may face in the exam. And as you know, you're probably going to spend around 20 minutes on this, because it's worth about 30% of your final result for the writing, and then the other 40 minutes you'll probably spend on IELTS Academic Writing Task 2. So let's jump into this. Number 1, do not use contractions. This is academic writing. We never use contractions in academic writing. This is why sometimes even native English speakers may fail at the IELTS writing task, because although they can write grammatically perfect sentences, and although they may have a very rich vocabulary, it doesn't count for much if you are writing academically. I mean, especially the vocabulary might. However, if you're writing academically, we do need to switch gears, so to speak. We need to upgrade our language and we need to make it more formal. Hence, do not use contractions. Write out the full version. And just the next level, this is what I love, as you may know, when we shift from correcting to improving. But even if you're writing out the full version, try and find a negative verb to replace it. So instead of saying don't use contractions, we would say do not use contractions. And then the next version of that would be omit contractions from your writing. And this it just flows a little bit easier. It reads a little bit easier. And then this is next level stuff that really what we focus on when we are giving you feedback with your essay corrections. Number 2, do not list all the data points that you see. I remember when I correct essays, especially academic reports, of the graphic, and every single data point is noted. And this brings me to the next point. This is kind of like a bonus point, but to avoid listing all the points, what we need to do is group the data. And grouping data is a skill in itself that probably needs some practice, especially if you're not from this field. For example, maybe biologists or engineers who are taking the IELTS test may find this a little bit easier because they're used to interpreting scientific data, whereas somebody who, I don't know, studying cinematography, even native English speakers fail sometimes. Even somebody from the arts, let's say, somebody from the arts could struggle with this because they're not used to interpreting and processing so much data. And it might seem a natural conclusion just to list everything, but that would be a mistake. What you have to do is just start grouping it. So that's a skill. Number 3, organize it. Organize your writing. Take a few minutes out before you start and just interpret the graph. A good tip here is to maybe, when you're practicing, just to put the graph at arm's length away. So the details are too far away for you to notice, and then this way you can get an overall picture. And this is what we want to describe. This is what we want to communicate. A good way to think of this is imagine that the reader has not got access to the graphic, and therefore your writing has to give an overall picture. They should be able to draw this graph from your description, but not in a detailed way. They should be able to draw, or at least render, an overall picture. So this is why it's so important just to spend those couple of minutes before you jump into it, interpret it, take it in, and get an idea about what is happening. Even say it verbally in your mind. Even say it like, okay, stocks fell at the beginning of the period, then they all dropped except for corn, which rose in the final quarter. Just a very general overview. Number 4, which I sometimes see, and it's a little bit disappointing because this is what we were talking about before about the academic writing. Well, this is what I mentioned before with native English speakers, that they could be tempted to include their personal opinion. And we do not want the personal opinion in there because it's objective. We're just reporting the information that's in front of us, nothing more, nothing less. So a native English speaker might go into this overly confident, writing with contractions, and even including their personal opinion because they know the reason why. But if you are adding information, which is your opinion, a form of adding information would be your opinion, then you're making a mistake. So just avoid this. Number 5, use a variety of language. To take it to the next level, use the specific language. So if we're looking at a pie chart, you need to get a good grip of your fractions, a third, a half, a fifth, a tenth. If you're using dynamic charts, usually line charts, we're going to be using adverbs such as drastically. It rose, or it fell drastically, or it shot up amazingly. That might be a bit overuse, but we could say a neat plateau. We say it fell sharply. Also, if we're using bar charts, well, if we're using any chart, we could say double that of the previous quarter, or double that of the previous stock, or whatever the measurement is. So this fancy language, we've got whole tutorials about this. Number 6, select the information. This is what I was telling you about before, selecting and grouping. I know so many students struggle with this. We have a specific module all about grouping the information. And I hate giving this kind of advice, but because it's so generic. However, the more you do it, the easier it gets, obviously. Shortcuts can be found in the way, what I said before, of like holding it out at a distance. However, if you've got a table of just numbers, then you do definitely need to perfect this skill of grouping. And as I said, in the Academic Task 1 course, we have a module all about this because we know it's a very common pain point. Next tip, superlatives. Superlatives are essential. You know, the most, the largest, the smallest. Not only will it help you get to grips with the actual criteria, not get to grips, not only will it help you fulfill the criteria of giving an overview, because an overview would include, obviously, the maximums and the minimums, but it's also going to help you with your grammatical range and accuracy score, because these are grammatical forms that the examiner is looking for in your writing. With the superlative, you need to really just dive in. Personally, I find doing translations from, for example, when I was learning superlatives in Spanish, I would just do it back and forth, translations from Spanish to English, English to Spanish, Spanish to English, back and forth, just entire lists. And I'm pretty certain you can find a list in your own language and then start translating it and then translating it back and just comparing. This is a great way, actually, just to improve your own language skills because you've got the answer right in front of you. It's not as if you were writing from your own mind, which is what we do usually when we're writing a report or an essay. And in that case, it's usually much more difficult to get feedback. Whereas if you're doing a translation, you've got a good chunk of you've got practically all the feedback there that you need. You've got the answers. That's the right word. Next one, use vocabulary that corresponds to the question. This kind of relates to what I was saying before, the suitable language. So fractions for pie charts, for map descriptions, we possibly need the compass points, the northernmost part, the southern part, or if you want to go into more detail, to the right of the building, to the left of the building, in the upper corner. This kind of vocabulary that corresponds to the question. Next one. When you have finished your writing, find the highest denomination currency or money that you have in your country and attach it to the paper. No, I'm just joking. Don't do that. Don't do that. Next one. I've also slightly mentioned this, touched on this before, but if we're going for a band 7 or higher, we want to use what we kind of advanced language that just adds a richness to our report and makes it slightly more interesting, adds a bit of colour. By this I mean we say we can use phrases like production almost tripled in the final quarter. Yeah, it sounds so much richer than saying production reached 3,000 in Q3. Yeah, that just sounds so generic. It's almost like a bot wrote it. So we can say double that of the previous quarter, 5 times as large as the previous month. This kind of language would just enrichen your language, your writing. Practice tests are definitely useful. Not only are you going to find like all the different types of charts that you could face, pie charts, bar charts, line charts, maps, tables, flow diagrams, all of this. But you're going to discover your weaknesses. Now, there is one little point that I want to mention with this while you're doing the practice tests. It's a good idea to get feedback. Now, if you are strapped for cash, so to say, if money is tight at the moment, a cheap way to get some feedback is just to hand in your work for proofreading, and then you're just going to quickly find the errors. And usually you can get that at quite a low rate. If you have the money, and I assume you might have the money because you're paying for the exam, and if you want to actually save money and avoid taking the exam again, then I'd recommend getting feedback. At IELTS Podcast, we've got Daphne, Ellen, and sometimes myself. We are giving feedback on essays. And we're not only going to tell you where the error is, we'll also try and coach you. Not try and coach you, we will coach you, and we will teach you the better way to say it. Not just as in the grammatically correct way, but we will say, okay, this is good, but to improve it, to get that band 7, you need to write it like this. And also, just one more thing with this. The autocorrectors are fine, but they cannot really follow an essay. They cannot really follow a report. So they might be able to tell you grammatically some of the mistakes, but they won't really be able to tell you if it sounds correct. Also, they won't be able to kind of understand the essay as a whole. And obviously, just for example, it's very unlikely they'll be able to spot some repetitions. So if you're repeating verbs, repeating sentences, or repeating structures, it might come out grammatically fine, but that's not going to get you to band 7. Next tip. When you are doing your practice tests, just do it in your own time at first. Do not worry about the timer. Be aware of it. Okay, it took me 40 minutes this time, it took me 30 minutes, that's fine. Be aware of it, but just get familiar with it. Give yourself a break, you know? You're putting yourself through the IELTS exam. You don't want to make it any harder than it is. So start writing, especially the first ones you write. Just write them in your own time, in a leisurely fashion, and go for accuracy first. And then, as you get more comfortable with it, then start turning the screw, so to speak. Start turning the screw on yourself and making it a little bit harder. But there's no way, it's completely ludicrous to open up your IELTS book for the first time ever, or download some practice tests, and then, okay, I've got 20 minutes to write this. Let's see how fast I can do it. No, it's just going to be stressful. It's going to make it more difficult for yourself, and that's the last thing we want to do. Next tip, be aware of the units. This goes back to planning your writing. Are we talking about millions? Are we talking about thousands? Are we looking at decimal places or commas? Remember, I know in a lot of countries, sometimes you use a decimal place, a full stop or a dot, to signify thousands, whereas in English A dot is a decimal place. So there is a big difference between 100, for example, 100.000. In English, that's just 100, whereas in Spanish and other countries, that is actually 100,000. So be very careful. This is an easy place, an easy way to lose points. Again, going back to the final point, going back to the overview, we want to get, when we're going back to the plan, we want to get a general feel, the trend, the overall idea. This is why holding the graph at a distance is going to help you. You're just going to get an overall feel. And you can do this with pie charts as well. For example, there's usually going to be a section that is bigger than the rest. That's the one we want to pay attention to. Likewise, there's going to be a section which is probably smaller, or a group of smaller sections. Again, we want to pay attention to those. This is what grouping the data means. Maybe there's not a majority part, but most likely in that case we could probably group one or two that are similar sized and group that into the majority if that is the case. So it just comes down to getting to grips with this and getting familiar with it. We want to be able to develop these grouping skills. We want to be able to develop these different grammatical structures and not just learn them, but learn them to a point of mastery so that in the exam they become automatic and natural in a way that we don't have to lose mental energy thinking about the grammatical structure. We want to learn it to a point it becomes natural so we can just write them and focus on the actual task. And then this is what basically comes down to focusing on the exam skills, because hopefully we've got our language skills up to such a level that they are becoming quick and automatic. I know it's easier said than done. In an ideal case, we've done so many tests and we've got so much feedback and we've improved so much that we've got our exam skills coming quickly and automatic and our language skills becoming quick and automatic as well. And when you reach this level, it's so much easier, obviously, and you've got so much more confidence, which acts like a turbo boost on your writing, speaking, whatever. And it just helps you boost your score and just gets you in a better frame of mind. So if you want to take your writing to the next level, have a look at the feedback we give. I've hidden the special offer on the essay corrections we are offering at the moment. What I've done is, what you have to do now is you sign up to IELTS Podcast, sign up to the email list, go to IELTSPodcast.com/sign up, then immediately you will get this offer for a very specially priced essay correction offer. And then all you do is write the essay answer or the report answer that we send you via email. You buy the correction, you get onto the next stage, you get an email in your inbox with the question. You write it, you email it to us, and then usually within 24 hours, we will send you your feedback. And we're not only going to point out the mistakes, we're going to give you some tuition and coaching to help you get to band 7. And this is usually the first step. This is usually what students do. They try our services. Usually they're quite pleased with them, and then they go on to join the online course, which includes the guarantee of jump to band 7, or it's free. And you're not only going to get to 7. If you're on a 7 already, we can usually, or often, we can get you to 7.5 or an 8. You know, if you're on a band 8 and you're really gunning for that band 9, send us an email along with your correction, and we can help you and we can guide you. Okay, so tell us your situation as well, and we can adapt our tuition for your needs. But at the end of the day, we are here to help you improve. That's it from me, and I wish you the best of luck with your IELTS preparation. You're not alone. We are here, and we're here to help you to eliminate confusion and help you to get to that Band 7 and get to the UK, or get your permanent residency in Australia, or get that settled status in the UK. We can help you. That's why we are here. All the best and keep on improving. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to IELTSPodcast.com.